Today's topic is how to get your press releases cited by AI. And I know that right now it feels like you can't even open LinkedIn without just immediately being blasted by the whole gamut of reactions to AI, so different AI views, like the sort of snake oil that comes with it. But this is the postmodern, pre-apocalyptic reality that we live in, and like with any new technology, we need to work out how we can use it to improve what we're doing, and also think about maybe ways that we shouldn't be using it, or ways in which it just isn't helpful. And so we hope to get into some of those practicalities during the show. Let me bring on the panel now and give them a very brief introduction. Welcome, everybody. Oops, sorry, Jasper. I think I just flicked you off for no reason. Okay, so joining us today there's Jessie Wynants. Jessie, I never actually asked to pronounce your last name, so I'm sorry. It's been like 6 years, and I'm just realizing this now. But Jessie is the co-founder and CEO of Prezly. He'll be able to help contextualize how the demands of PR are shifting in light of AI, and also answer any questions about our roadmap. I know, Jessie, you've also been recently playing around with how to integrate AI with Prezly and with other tools that you're using, so maybe you can give us some insights on that. Next, we have Jasper. Give us a wave, Jasper. Yeah, you can see us. So Jasper specializes in growth marketing here, and when he's not surfing, he is all about, growth marketing, which means that you've been looking a lot at SEO and how that translates to GEO. So you'll also be showing us this quick little tool you made to try and help people start thinking about how to optimize their press releases for AI. And finally, our guest of honor is Christopher S. Penn, who I'm sure many of you are already very familiar with. Hi, Chris.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm sorry for dragging you out of bed at, I think it's 8 o'clock where you are. That's entirely on me. So Christopher is the co-founder and chief data scientist at Trust Insights, and an 8-time IBM champion who I think you've been pioneering this whole idea of data-driven PR as well as AI since about 10 years now, maybe more?
2012.
Good Lord. That's a lot. That's a previous decade. So you know what you're talking about, and you probably recognize Chris from places like the Marketing Over Coffee podcast, your Almost Timely newsletter, keynotes, events, your books, your recent fiction book that maybe we'll go into later. So Chris, you're everywhere, and we are very fortunate to have you with us today. And with that, I would like to start by addressing a question to you, Chris, which is, there are so many tools claiming that they can get you cited on AI, they can get your product, your brand on AI. Is that all snake oil, or is there some truth in it?
Well, if it helps to first understand what GEO is, because this is the foundation of really everything. It's a 3-stage system. The first is what the models themselves know. This is where things like press releases play an important role, because models are retrained approximately every 12 to 18 months. Companies go out and scrape enormous amounts of data, and then 6 months of baking in a data center turns it into a new version of the model. So that's part one, is you need to have content out there everywhere so that models generate the statistics, which is what an AI model is. It's a big pile of statistics that even understand what a space is about. The second phase is then when a model either has low confidence in its response or detects based on intent that a web search is necessary, it will then go and do a web search. And so you'll see Google's Gemini, AI mode, AI overviews, ChatGPT, et cetera, all go and do their web searches. That's part two. That is traditional SEO. That has not changed. And those companies that fire their SEO agencies, you're in for a bad time. And then the third phase is relevance, which is when the models retrieve data based on their searches, they then have to weigh how relevant is that data. And this is things like everything from LLMs.txt to markdown versions of your content to just having good compliance to something like WCAG 2.1, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, so that a model can, when it gets data back, looks at it and goes, okay, I see how this is relevant. A really bad example of that is CNN. If you look at CNN's website, using a screen reader or any other tool for the visually impaired, you will see a page full of how did you like this ad, right? Followed by 7 pages of navigation, followed by the content eventually. And so tools like ChatGPT, for example, only look at the first 400 to 600 words that are returned. And so if it's all crap, they're going to discard it as not relevant to the query. So when we talk about optimizing for AI, it is not one thing, and every system does it differently. So Google's AI mode and AI overviews use a version of Gemini called Gemini Flash 3.5. They just announced this 2 months ago. But that model has not had its knowledge updated since January of 2025. Why?
What?
Because Google does not care about the model's freshness of knowledge because they control the knowledge upstream and downstream from the model. So if you're optimizing for AI mode and AI overviews, which is still 90-ish% of all search, you are still doing traditional SEO.
Incredible. That's huge. So we'll dig into this a bit more later, but I'd be curious to see how the timeliness of the content that you publish, so like your owned content, your newsroom content, and also coverage affects the different models differently in that case. And I'm sort of skipping ahead here, but one of the things I wanted to talk about is all of these models are affiliated with different news networks, right? And like different content providers. So does that mean that if I use ChatGPT, it will like prioritize something that was published in Wired and like their opinion and their facts versus, I don't know, like whatever they don't own?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, every model does things differently. For example, the way Claude does its information retrieval is different than the way ChatGPT does its, and it varies based on the system you're in and the harness it's in. So one of the concepts that folks need to understand is that AI models are like car engines, right? And you can get bigger or smaller engines, get really nice ones, but nobody goes down the street sitting on a car engine, right? You're in a car. And so the rest of the car is the harness. So when you're using Google AI mode, that's a different harness than AI overviews, right? That is a different harness than ChatGPT, which is a different harness than OpenAI Codex, right? Codex is their co-working agent utility. Claude Cowork is a different harness than Claude Code, which is a different harness than Claude Chat. And so with the harness you use also changes how the models retrieve information because they're given different directives. So the commonality under all of this is understanding semantics and linguistics, understanding how language works. If I say I'm drinking the tea, right, or I'm brewing the tea, in North American English and UK English, we generally understand this means a beverage made of hot water and dried leaves. If I say I'm spilling the tea, that changes not only the verb, but it also changes the object of the sentence. Spilling the tea is slang for gossip. It's a different statistical distribution. So when we're creating any content, we have to figure out what are the statistical relationships between the content we're creating and what people are searching for. And there's the machines all have their own math to do this. But one of the most common is a similarity measure called cosine similarity. Now, if you skipped trigonometry or you fell asleep through it in school, if you take a document and you turn it into the same math that AI uses called embeddings, and you measure the closeness between your document and the other things that a model knows in that space, you want to get it as close as possible to the part of the model that it understands to know what that's about. And so one of the things that like when I put together a press release, I do it by hand with Claude. I use 2 measures. I use cosine similarity and BM25, which are both algorithms that Claude can write code against to say, here's my release. Here's the corpus of known good results, right? Because you go to Google search, pull up the top 10 results, grab the pages and say, okay, here's the corpus of the top 10 pages and say, how does my release measure up? And it will say like, you score a 0.37 out of 1. Like, oh, crap. And so you say to Claude, okay, keep optimizing this until you get to 0.6 or better. And it will go back and churn until it gets to that measure. And at that point, you know, okay, semantically, mathematically, my release is now closer to the actual results that are returned.
Okay, I'm going to keep dragging this out because I'm really interested.
Let Jasper and Jesse talk. They're just sitting here going,
No, they're just sitting there and looking pretty.
I think what is interesting about this is I think it's actually a good thing that they do these things differently. The big boys, like Google has a different way than ChatGPT, than Claude, and ideally there's 5 others, which there are, right? That way we basically do like a large litmus test if you can see and can start comparing these things. But this just proves that it's different than SEO, because at some point in SEO, Google just took the market and you just needed to score well on Google and all the rest would follow. But that's probably not where I see this is going with these LLMs, right? Because you basically have, let's say, 3 to 4 big players. I would say just 3 if you just take Claude, ChatGPT, and Gemini. And they all have like slightly different kind of incentives as well. Claude being more enterprise-driven, ChatGPT consumer, and Google that wants to eventually protect their AdWords business as well. So in essence, I think that's an interesting way. And this is also why I use all 3, and I use all 3 quite regularly on a daily basis. And I think as you start seeing what works best for what type of kind of queries you're doing. And that's interesting. But like I mentioned, super early days, and I mentioned this last time when we spoke, it's super early days. Like we'll need to see where this goes, because like it's very much in flux and in going. What I do think is something that highlights super well that more than ever, these models actually do live web searches, as you said, Chris. So SEO, I think there's more web searches going on than ever before, right? It's just less humans doing it, right? So that's I guess the trend that I follow along as well. So SEO still matters, but not necessarily for humans directly, but for the machines that are actually doing those web searches. There's always gonna be, I think an LLM has the tendency to come up with the answer that works best for the question you asked it, right? Whether this is right or wrong, right? That's not what an LLM does. It just kind of wants to give you the best possible answer regardless of the question. So they need to build in those ranking things as well. Because if you let the LLM rip, he's just going to give you the answer that he kind of fits best to your solution, whether this is right or wrong. This is what they call hallucinating, right? So in essence, I think that's just where they need to build in those ranking and authoritative kind of things as well. And we'll see where that goes. But that's kind of like super interesting and very much an ongoing kind of conversation of where this is going to end at.
One thing I will suggest is that, Kate, I'm going to bring up my screen here real quick. The big 3 are not the only models that we need to be focusing on. No. Kate, I shared my screen. If you look at OpenRouter, which is the largest independent token measurement service for use, look at the top 5 models: DeepSeek V4 Flash, Mimo 2.5, which is made by Xiaomi, Minimax M3, which is by Minimax, the Singapore and Beijing company, Owl Alpha, and Hi3, which is by Tencent. All 5 of the top models are Chinese. And then you have Claude Opus 4.7, GLM 5.2. Now, this is through OpenRouter, so this is very heavily skewed towards developers. It's not your average person. However, what's happening is as costs of AI go up, which a lot of people who have gotten very large Copilot bills know that, you are seeing the use of a lot of these Chinese models, which are as capable as Western models, but like a tenth of the cost. And they are being built into more and more applications, which is the folks at Anderson Horowitz said that 85% of the startups that are pitching them are using Chinese models as the base. So it's important when we're doing stuff like GEO to remember, A, that they exist, and B, that we need to understand how they think as well. So if you're doing any kind of GEO testing and stuff like that, particularly DeepSeek and GLM 5.2 are the 2 that you really need to pay attention to.
So how would you do this sort of AI testing? So say that I'm not insanely AI literate, like I'm happy using Cloud, ChatGPT, make small tools, whatever, but I don't code. How would I take my newsroom or my press release, and what would I have to run it through to sort of start to understand if it's doing a good job for AI literacy?
You don't have to code because the machines can code. The machines can code in any language. They're better coders than a human. I would suggest so there's what we call 5 levels of AI, right? There is done by you, which is like ChatGPT, right? You're doing all the work, like you're typing it. There's done with you, which is the second level, which is where you have things like GPTs and gems. They're basically standard operating procedures baked into a tool. Then there's done for you, level 3. This is agents. This is where they make the big change from being individual contributor to a manager. So this is tools like Claude Cowork, Claude Code, Open Code, OpenAI Codex, Google Anti-Gravity, etc. These are the tools that you give them a recipe, you give them a project plan, they go off and they do it. And then there's 2 more levels on top of that. For the average marketer, I would strongly suggest that you fire up one of these agent level tools like Claude Code or Claude Cowork. Cowork is a great option for non-technical folks, OpenAI Codex, etc. Give them something like your press release and just copy paste the top 10 results, not the results in the search engine of choice, but the actual page content itself, and say, hey, AI tool, I need to mathematically understand with something like Jacquard similarity or cosine similarity why my release is or is not a good fit for this corpus, right? You write the code, you figure it out, and then tell me based on the math what I should do differently. So you don't have to do the coding. You don't have to do the hard work. It knows how to do that. You have to give it a project plan that says, measure this for me, and then show me what adjustments to make. That's the way I would suggest for anyone. And yes, the first time you do that, it is intimidating. But then you start getting the hang of it and going, wow, this is actually not all hard. And the advantage of using an agent tool is that once it writes that code, it can reuse it over and over again. You don't have to do it every single time. You say, okay, just off you go.
Have you found any issues with that, or does it work fairly smoothly? Like how much human review and sort of jiggling around afterwards have you had to do, especially if you're trying to write a press release or a story that's not just for AI, it's also for human readers at the same time?
This is basic for a machine. This is basic math, right? Cosine similarity is one of the most basic mathematical functions. You don't need to, as non-technical, non-mathematical. I know a lot of people got into marketing and people are like, I got into this for the arts and crafts department. I did not get into this for math, right? The machine can do that very, very, very easily. And once it's in place, if you think through, hey, could you make this reusable for me? It will turn it into a tiny little app that you can then reuse whenever you want, and it doesn't need AI, right? Or if it does, it needs a very inexpensive AI. In terms of making the text accessible, it really is just more about anything. It's the semantics. So it's going to suggest different language to use. If you take a company like Prezly, for example, Prezly does public relations, right? So if you have a press release that is all about investor relations, but you're trying to target public relations, it's good. Mathematically, you're going to say, well, you know what? If you use terms like public relations or public affairs, that is mathematically closer to the search results you want to be in than than what you've written.
Amazing. So it still works. There's a question that just came in from Nico that I think, Jesse, you'd be good to address, saying, is such an agent level tool available in Prezly, or do we need to upload our potentially confidential content onto another platform?
Yep. So in essence, there's a few ways that we've started seeing this happen with our customers, right? So Prezly has a full REST API available. So what does this mean without any technical knowledge is that you can give, let's say, I think it's a level 3 or level 4 agent access to all the data, secure access to all the data that you have on Prezly through an API. And I was in a LinkedIn conversation yesterday with a customer, like multiple customers actually, just in the past few weeks, that have started giving people access to their Prezly data through Claude Cowork or directly to it, right? And that works quite well. It's interesting because you can just start asking questions about your data. But I think where AI really shines if you give it enough context, right? And through that API, you can give it the context of your previous work that you've done in Prezly with the results it gave you, right? So from that, I think that is kind of where we're building on and how we're going to kind of make further steps forward. We've built like the kind of press release AI generator, rater as kind of an initial kind of prototype test to see what we can do. But eventually it is, of course, our goal to make sure that we can not just do it based on, let's say, generic data, but also do it based on what were releases that you've published through our system that got good results, and see if we can kind of mimic that in your specific case. Because however we see it, the industries in PR are so much different, right? If you do, let's say, more consumer PR, that's completely different than you're in heavy B2B PR, right? So you can't necessarily kind of like have one like tool fits all solution for that. You really need to see on like which industry is a customer active in, and what can we learn from that industry, and then return back, right? So these are the steps that we're taking. These are being taken quite rapidly, right? So like this is the API opening up. That's one step. This is another experiment that we're doing. And I think the next quarter, you'll start seeing more of these experiments happen in your Prezly account as well.
Actually, that leads us nicely to Jasper. I was hoping to ask you to show off the tool you built that I realize is still sort of in beta, but it should help people start thinking about some of these sort of best practice things that they can include in their press releases to help it get AI citations. It's not actually an AI. So what Chris has suggested, like absolutely go do that. If you want to try Jasper's, you can just copy paste and I think your press release fully confidential and get a few ideas straight away just to start thinking about that context. Can I hand over to you, Jasper?
Yeah, of course. So here, I'll go ahead and share my screen. And pretty much exactly what you mentioned. I'll just kind of repeat back a little bit. I think this is we slapped a beta sticker here for a reason. Like this is a very early tool, mostly to help you get a sense check of if your press release is headed in the right direction. Also as a good educational framework, just to help you understand a little bit more about what AI is looking for when it decides to cite a press release. So, like what Christopher also mentioned earlier, this is kind of a skill that's been packaged up from a lot of different AI insight, and now it's not using AI to repeat that process. But as we continue building this out, context is really key with us trying to feed more context into a tool like this to get it to perform better. And there's a little note here, and I'll just mention it, right? This runs in the browser. If you're worried about confidential information, nothing that we have in here is tracked or saved. So you can put any content here and rest assured we're not going to be tracking that. So to make this tool a bit easier to understand, we have a sample release that you can put in here, which is just a quick sample release that we created for Prezly. And then you just click on grade my press release. So now here on the left-hand side, you have an editor. And then on the right, you have some ideas on what to improve. So if you've used a tool like Grammarly before, this was kind of built with the same thinking in mind, where you can enter whatever content you want, and it's going to highlight some focus areas for you to work on. See, with this specific example, there's 9 fixes, and you're getting a 51 out of 100, right? And again, really, one of the more valuable parts about this is looking at the what to improve, less so than the grade. The grading part isn't perfect yet, but understanding a bit more about what makes it easier for AI to be able to understand, index, contextualize the information in your press release, that's all on the right-hand side, and it's kind of explained in as simple terms as we can get. So, for example, I'll just look at this one here, right? In the press release, we mentioned that engagement rose about 30%, right? If an AI is looking at that, that's a low confidence level metric for it to be able to cite. And so it suggests moving that hedge phrase or removing that hedge phrase. So instead of saying about 30%, click here and just say engagement rose 30%. That increases the confidence that AI can have in citing that sort of metric when it's looking to source information. So there's lots of examples here with that. What I'll mention next here is this area that just tells you kind of which facts you have inside of your press release that AI could be citing. So for example, you see in a closed beta, 480 teams use Studio and publish 6,200 stories, which is right here in the press release. And so what this section does is it just tries to take any as close to objective information as it can find and tell you which areas of that are likely for the AI to cite from the press release to give you a better understanding of, maybe if you have nothing that shows up in this area, you can understand that maybe there's some areas that you want to include new text that could increase the likelihood of AI actually citing your release. And while this is based on trying to find objective metrics, obviously it's very subjective if AI would cite it, but there's a higher likelihood due to the objective nature of it. And then the final section here is just AI ready skeleton is kind of what we're calling it. And this is more focused on the content structure. So how much of your content that's here on the left-hand side is actually structured for AI to easily read it. Again, kind of like what Christopher mentioned with that CNN example. If it's not structured properly, AI is not going to look at all of the content on your page in as neatly as a way as you'd like it to. And so using the skeleton helps you understand a little bit better how you want to structure and source your information. So you can see here, there's no quote. So you can click here just to add a placeholder for a quote. Same with an about section maybe. And then it can actually go ahead and rearrange your release to be in the order that we think will help you get a higher chance of getting cited by AI. So that's where we're at with the tool right now. Again, as we keep doing more research, trying to understand a little bit better how people can get their press releases cited with AI better using Prezly or really any other tool. We're going to keep working on this and ideally getting AI directly integrated into to give it more context and a bit more flexibility. We do mention here, right, and this is important to note, the check, this only looks at the text content, so it's not going to be looking at the technical side of your press release setup or your newsroom setup. So there are things like making sure that your newsroom is actually built and optimized for these AI tools to be able to crawl easily. And there's a lot of other technical sides here, which we mention are worth you configuring onto wherever you host your press release to increase the likelihood. Last thing I'll say, and I think Kate's going to link out to these resources later, a lot of this is based off of, we tried to find as many peer-reviewed sources as we could on this topic, as well as just other articles and areas of research where people have included best practices or ideally any data to help understand and inform a bit better what works well for getting your press releases optimized. So if you want to look at those resources to understand better kind of where our insights on this are coming from, we'll have links for those as well for you. But I'll keep sharing here in case you have any questions that you want to follow up with Kate.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to lead on to just the best practices for this press release. So I know you've looked through the sidebar, but what are the main things that a person who isn't using like an AI tool to review their press release, what should they be keeping in mind, and how is that different from a regular press release? Because most press releases will have a boilerplate, they will have a quote, they will have the date and everything up front. I say most very optimistically again. But yeah, so what are the sort of checklist things that people should keep in mind? That's an open question.
Well,
yeah, I'll start. Oh, sorry, you can go ahead. I was
going to suggest that for your tool, Jasper, one thing you might want to do is on the what to improve side, add a little widget that says copy this as markdown, and then someone can take the recommendations list, copy it with the press release, put it into their AI tool, and say, "Help me fix it."
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, one thing that we already see if you compare this with maybe more marketing pages, is one thing is that the traffic on the newsroom for all of our customers from Perplexity, from ChatGPT, Google, we can't split it out if what is coming from their AI answers and what's coming from, but the traffic is increasing steadily, which kind of tells me a few things, right? Press releases, or the things that, let's keep it broader, the things that communication teams put out by definition are interesting for LLMs. The reason for that is that they are usually the official point of view from a specific company. They're usually a lot of facts in there, and there's usually lots of quotes in there as well, which by definition are kind of interesting sources, and they have a date stamped into it, right? So by definition, these things are like more kind of like loved by these systems than, let's say, a static product page, or let's say a more marketing page, right? Because it just delivers you more factual details. So that is something that we see. So by definition, if you're already kind of like more in the, let's say, communication story building part, it actually helps you already versus just pushing kind of like more promotional pages out there.
Yeah. In what order, like say you already have a newsroom that you've been keeping up for a few years for a specific brand, in what order would you start trying to optimize it for AI, and how would you approach that? I guess the answer is, again, use another AI tool to analyze it. And we'd love to have details on how you would approach that, especially from you, Chris. But otherwise, like if I only have so many hours in the day, how would I break up my work? What is the most important thing to focus on first?
If you wanted to optimize in the least amount of effort, what I would do is, again, grab one of those agentic tools, go and old school. What I would do is grab the top URLs for the thing that, the topic that you care about, or alternately, one of the things to Jesse's point, Google is now rolling out AI overview data in Google Search Console, right? So that is a useful source of what queries or pages is Google showing. So you want to look at that topically. You also absolutely positively, if you're B2B, you should be using Bing Webmaster tools. And the reason for that is because people laugh. It's like, oh, Bing, ha ha ha.
Also Vista, right?
Well, so here's the thing about Bing Webmaster tools. Bing Webmaster tools. I'm going to share my screen here. Let me go ahead and bring this up. Bing Webmaster Tools has an AI Performance tab. And on the AI Performance tab, if you scroll down, are the grounding queries that AI uses. Now, this is important because this is Microsoft Copilot, the #1 enterprise AI tool. So you are seeing what Copilot is saying, here's what your site is being cited for. And so this is not just impressions. These are the citations. So this is my site. You can see skills versus agents, reporting cadence, meaning. Copilot is telling people inside itself in the largest B2B companies or the largest enterprise companies, period, hey, Christopher Penn's website is relevant for this topic. So you can see the grounding queries, and then you can see what pages get the most citations. Right. So this is literally everything that you would, as a GEO expert, would want to know. Like, what's am I getting cited for? Look at the number of PDFs that are being shown in this list. Like, oh, okay, Copilot likes the old PDF here. So I might be starting to think about, like, maybe I should be making some things available like that. But like agents versus skills, reported cadence, Opus plan, the model, and stuff like that. The Opus plan thing is new. Like, I put that content up not too long ago. And it is one of the most cited things in Copilot. So you absolutely positively want to be doing this. Look in here and then go look at your competitors. Go look at the topic overall and see if you can distill out with the AI tool of your choice and give it the URLs to 10 pages and say, hey, using embeddings and cosine similarity, tell me what should be in my press release. The other thing, and this goes back to what Jasper was saying about your software, is you don't have control over the news release sites themselves, right? So some sites will be better than others. For example, this is Metro West Daily News, which is sort of the hometown paper. This is our news release from a newswire. When I put it in the AI view tool that I linked in the chat there, which is free to use, if you scroll down, this website, Metro West Daily News, gets a D. Right? Meta information is all screwed up. Their content's a mess, and they actively block a lot of different AI crawlers, which means that in terms of helping train models or helping browse on behalf models work, this site does me no good, right? So the news release itself is good, but this site is not helping because this will not appear in any citations because they're literally saying, get out, AI, we don't want you here. There's two types of bots.
Do you find that that's the case for all newswires? Because you mentioned there was a newswire you were looking at, or like news aggregators.
This is true of a lot of news sites. They are actively blocking AI tools because, like, that they make their money on content, which is. I have some questions for their strategy teams. But there's two kinds of bots. One is training bots that say, okay, we're going to vacuum up all your content and train our models on it. I can understand for a news site saying, yeah, we don't want you doing that because you're an economic competitor to us then. The browse on behalf bots, everybody should be letting those through, because when ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini says, hey, I'm going to go look at this website for you as part of a conversation, it goes out. And in this case, if it sees in a traditional search, check Metro West Daily News, it goes there and the Metro West Daily News says, take a long walk off a short pier. I'm like, okay, well, then I'm not going to use this as a citation because I can't even get to it because I've been blocked, right? They block ChatGPT, they block OpenAI, they block Claude, they block Perplexity. So this site does no good for citation. Thankfully, work with a reputable newswire and stuff like that so that you have a wide spread of distribution. But the tools that we have for optimizing press releases don't do any good if the news sites are blocking them.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that you would recommend Bing Webmaster tools for B2B specifically. What do the rest of us use for our side hustles that aren't B2B?
Google search. So you want to see what Copilot is recommending, right? Because even if you're not B2B, people are still using Copilot at work. So you're still going to get some value out of that, whether or not you're B2B. But if you're B2B, you absolutely should be doing that if you're in the enterprise space. And for everybody else, you should be using Google Search Console because, as I mentioned, Google is rolling out that data to say, here's where, the impressions you're getting, and they only tell you impressions. And this is what's going, what's being returned. The other tool I recommend, and this one does require payment, is Cloudflare. So Cloudflare is a content delivery network. They're probably one of the biggest ones. And there's a free version, but there's in the paid version. If I go into, and I'm going to share my screen again here. If I go into AI crawl control and I look at overview for the Trust Insights website, I can see which AI crawlers are visiting my site and then how much each crawler gives me in terms of traffic. Right. So people actually click through. So OpenAI visited 11,000 times and sent me 9 people. Thanks, OpenAI. Thanks, Sam. Appreciate that. Anthropic, 3,600 requests from Claude, 1 referral. Right. Google, 25,000 requests, 7,000 referrals. Right. So Google is doing the heavy lifting there for me. DuckDuckGo, and so on and so forth. But also in here, you can then look at what content types and formats are the bots crawling, and in particular, what paths or pages do they like. So for us, it's the blog, right? The blog is what the AI crawlers are coming to consume. So we can get first-party data from our CDN that says, here's what AI is doing on site. So this is another tool that you can use that gives you real data. One of the biggest bones I have to pick with a lot of the AI visibility tools is that they're making shit up, right? Because they're either using synthetic queries against an API, which is fine, but it's not what real people use. And the tools people do not understand just how much personalization is in this. Lily Ray in New York City and Garrett Sussman from iPullRank both showed that Google's AI mode pulls from things like your Gmail account, your YouTube history, your Google Photos to personalize search results. Garrett showed at SEO Week in May, he set up synthetic accounts and subscribed them to different mailing lists, and then showed that if a newsletter, not from your company, but just mentioned your company, was in your Gmail inbox, it had a higher propensity of showing up in AI mode as a citation than not, because Google was pulling from its Gmail database to help personalize search for you. Right. So even things like, when you're thinking about your press release, even things about like your email newsletter, getting people subscribed to your newsletter is one of the most valuable things you can do. And then having that in their inboxes in Gmail specifically, so that Google checks it and says, yeah, you know what? We should, Prezly should be cited as a source in the search result because this user's got like 40 newsletters all talking about Prezly in their inbox.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also just good practice for controlling your own audience, right, Jesse?
Just as a note on the Cloudflare and Google Search Console for just Prezly customers who have a newsroom with us, Cloudflare is in front of your newsroom, right? So we already capture that data. So if you're curious about that, happy to kind of draw an expert, and it will be available for you kind of later on in the interface. Google Search Console can be linked to your newsroom directly as well if you want to have more data. Just as a tip for people who want to have more details on that, we can, of course, kind of help with that. Sorry, Kate, your question.
I got distracted by the chat. I really love that Anne, you said that you are unable to use the tool that Christopher shared, and your response was, well, that means that AI is being blocked from your site as well. So great, you've already learned something. You mentioned something around the sort of wide breadth of information mentions for your brand and that affecting how AI picks you up. Is that what we should be looking for now? So like, and I'd like to draw a parallel with SEO. So, for example, when we were all crazy about SEO, we were all after getting backlinks from reputable sites. Now, does that matter so much? Is it better to have like fewer references to your brand, maybe even without a link, but more in depth? Or do you want more sort of points of reference there, or just different formats from like PDFs, newsletters, whatever else? What do we think?
You want everything you can get, right? So for example, I'm showing up on this webinar. Why? Because if you put it up on YouTube, then that becomes training data that, YouTube is the #1 training data source of today's AI because it contains video, it contains audio, it contains transcripts, it contains subtitles, it contains descriptions and tags and metadata and engagement and comments and all this stuff and stuff. So, literally be everywhere. Brand mentions matter in context. If your brand is mentioned in something that has nothing to do with your brand, that's actually not helpful. Ideally without competitors. So this was something that I looked at 2 weeks ago, measuring listicles and how listicles work from a ubiquity context. And it turns out once you get above 5, different companies making listicles, all mentioning different competitors, they harm more than help because you get basically giving your competitors a whole lot of airtime, and so is everybody else. So ideally, you want to have media that is rich in context, but is mentioning your brand, ideally without competitors in the mix.
Does that matter even if you're the one producing the content? So normally if I come along and I'm like, Prezly's great, then why should a human trust me when they know I'm getting paid by Prezly?
We're not talking about humans, though. We're talking about machines. Machines do not care. The East
So we're now making videos. We're making videos for AI. And okay. Presumably AI can crawl unlisted YouTube videos. So is there a case to be made for creating unlisted videos for AI specifically?
Third-party tools cannot crawl unlisted. Google can.
Okay. Right. So just like Gemini and whatever else.
Yes.
Interesting. So this leads on also, Christopher, I know you have been talking about the death of public social media, and with the idea of AI being locked out from a lot of public social media posts. What is the case there? Because I think the panic online in us sort of normie circles is AI is reading all of our social posts, it knows everything. But now you're telling me that it's actually being, well, how does that affect our ranking for our brand on, like, does it take social media posts into account for that ranking as like a signal of trust in the brand because other people
It depends on the network. So, for example, LinkedIn, owned by Microsoft. Guess who gets that data? OpenAI and Microsoft, right? Twitter.
But them exclusively.
Right. X is owned by XAI, so that feeds the Grok model. Look at any social network, Instagram, Threads, WhatsApp, etc. That's all owned by Meta. That feeds the Meta Spark model that Meta runs all of its infrastructure on. So every social network is training somebody else's data source. That's one of the reasons why they have all locked down their data to from third parties, because they want to feed it their own stuff. Reddit had a big algorithm change in the last week or so. They are aggressively going after AI bots. And here's the thing, AI bots are real easy to spot. You see it on LinkedIn when you post something and there's all 11 comments and they all have the exact same structure. Like, okay, clearly you are all using the exact same template from the exact same piece of software. And that pattern matching is easy to spot. But in terms of social networks, if you ideally you're publishing, again, publish everywhere that you possibly can, because the more of you out there that's relevant, the better.
So if I'm wanting to report to, say, if I'm a PR agency and I'm trying to report to my client about their AI visibility, is it even worth me going through every single model and trying to understand what that model sees about me? Or should I just invest in being everywhere and giving them a broad idea of how much traffic I get from AI citations?
You're not going to be able to do either of those, because in a lot of the cases with AI citations, someone's going to see an answer and it's kind of like word of mouth. Then they'll go Google for you. right?
They don't click it. Yeah.
The number one thing that we should all be advising our clients and our companies to do is on your contact form, have a free form text field that says, how did you hear about us? And then use the AI tool of your choice to say, how many times was any AI tool mentioned, right? And that tells you how your GEO is going. Nothing else is definitive other than from the word of coming out of the customer's mouth saying, oh yeah, I asked ChatGPT and they said Prezly was an awesome company. I asked Claude and said Trust Insights is the best company, et cetera, et cetera.
But I think what kind of confuses me sometimes is that this is actually what those companies are selling, right? They are selling you, like, listen, we compare your visibility versus ChatGPT, Claude, and so on and so on. And they're big companies with lots of deep pockets kind of selling this. So kind of what you're saying is, well, and I agree with you on that, is that you can ask the same question 3 times and it's always going to give you a different answer. And not all 3 will give you the mention. One of the 3 might, right? So how on earth can you kind of make a comparison based on that, right? Because it's not deterministic in that perspective. So kind of you say, like, I don't think there is value necessary into using those comparison tools.
There isn't. They're all bullshit. And anyone who tells you what your brand...
There we go. That's it. There we go.
Yeah. Anyone who tells you that they can tell you how your brand ranks in this model is lying to you. They're just lying. And if they're charging you money, they're lying and committing fraud. Here's the thing. SparkToro did a great study on this in January. They showed that to get the same 2 brands to show up in the same order, it takes 1,429 times with the same prompt in Claude to get the same 2 brands in the same order. It takes Google 148 tries to get the same 2. So there is no such thing as brand scoring. There is no such thing as deterministic AI visibility because, like you said, Jesse, these are probabilistic tools. They have randomness built into them. There is no such thing as, AI visibility with any level of determinism. Can you say that you've been in a result set at some point? Yes. Can you say what position or how strong? No. And again, anyone who says that is lying.
No, what we tell our customers, or whenever I'm speaking with customers on this, which is kind of interesting, is that we of course see referrals come in, right? But of course, when someone clicks a referral link and you see ChatGPT referred it, of course it doesn't mean anything of how many people kind of seen the answer, because who clicks those links? Maybe a journalist in our case would, because he wants to double check, right? But that's even not like. But in the end of the day, we don't like. Our customers usually don't care because they don't care about clicks. They're in communication. They care about getting the word out, right? So would you say that looking at these referral links is relevant, helpful in any case, or even not?
It's directional. Like, you can see clickstream traffic. I mean, if the clickstream traffic is 0, then obviously you know that things are not going well. What you should be concerned about is the things that come from the tools themselves. So, Bing's citations, Google Search Console citations, that gives you a ground truth from the vendor itself. Now, they might also be lying, but they're probably lying less. Again, it really comes down to there's 2 things you can measure. You can measure what you've done, right? And things like traditional brand monitoring technology to say, like, how many stories did we get? What is our coverage in a space compared to our competitors? That's useful, right? To say, okay, Prezly was mentioned 820 times in tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 publications this quarter. That's useful because at least it's out there. And then from the word of the customer's mouth saying, yes, I asked ChatGPT and they said Prezly was the company to work with, that is also useful. So you can measure kind of the bookends of here's what we did and here's what we see people saying. What's happening in the middle, as with all AI, is a black box.
I think that sounds great. So like you're saying that in terms of reporting, because the client will ask for information whether or not it exists. Like they'll demand proof. But if we still report on things like coverage, things that we can actually measure, social mentions, whatever else, and then have a more qualitative approach to the AI citations and say, like, well, here's some screenshots of how we are mentioned here. then perhaps that is like a more holistic sort of reporting
Yeah,
model.
because the AI isn't making stuff up, right? It's getting the information from somewhere, right? It's kind of making but in any way, right? It's found those details somewhere, whether this is social, whether this is the web, whether this is some proprietary data set that they've kind of trained on, but the data is coming from somewhere. So I think that's kind of always important to know. And sometimes people, like if I have my son kind of talking to someone and he says like to ChatGPT, he says like ChatGPT knows everything, right? But I tell him like, no, it's actually not ChatGPT. That knowledge is actually coming. It's actually coming from somewhere, right? So that's easy to forget, right? Because that is the brand that you're seeing when you're getting the answer. So that sometimes gives like a false narrative, like, and that's why I like Christopher saying like SEO is probably more important than ever, branding probably more important than ever, like all these things, socials probably more important than ever, because that is where these LLMs train on. And the better you score in each one of those, the higher chance you'll get to be mentioned in it, right? So I guess everything still makes sense. We just have this other thing to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, Jesse said it exactly right. The number one thing that you can do as a marketer or as a communicator is build your brand. Period. End of story. If you are not building your brand as an organization and as a human being, as your personal brand, you are missing the boat, because as AI tools become more and more integrated into literally everything, if the humans don't think to ask about you, the tools aren't going to help, right? The tools tend to reward the established players. So especially if you are the underdog in any space, put whatever budget and effort you can towards building brand, because that is the only thing that is going to save you.
Absolutely. And just to touch on briefly, because I think it's kind of relevant, a lot of this putting budget behind building brand probably means you'll end up using AI for things like helping you write LinkedIn posts or like some sort of material. And before the call, Christopher, you were saying that you see that as absolutely fine as long as you disclose that you're using AI for that. Otherwise, it sort of destroys all trust.
It's not that it destroys trust. It is fundamentally human beings reward the perception of effort, right? As a human, as one human to another. Like, you know, you appreciate when your kids make you something, even though objectively it's terrible, right? Because they made the effort. And people perceive, right or wrong, people perceive that when you use AI, you have not made an effort, right? You've let a machine do a lot of the typing. Whether or not that's true, because you know you can spend a lot of time being very thoughtful about how you prompt it and what you create and all the infrastructure around it. The reality is that people still will perceive it as being low effort, and with things like hallucination being less trustworthy. So you absolutely should disclose it. And you should also disclose it legally for a couple of reasons. Obviously, you know, with you folks all being based in Europe, GDPR is the law of the land. The EU AI Act is the law of the land. So disclosing the use of AI is a good thing. Also, legally, pretty much everywhere on the planet, an AI generated work that is not derived from a human work. So an AI generated work, you said, write me a blog post about B2B marketing, that cannot be copyrighted. It is public domain the moment it exists. And if a competitor borrows it, you have no recourse. So if you disclose the use of AI, then you are implicitly reinforcing your copyright claims on the things that are human generated by saying, like, this post was written by Kate, and you know, without the assistance of AI, it is fully and completely copyrighted. You cannot use it. Whereas if you say, hey, this was made with Gemini, right? Yeah, I can't copyright it because it is in the public domain. So you have to disclose it to reinforce the copyrights you do own.
That's a very good point. We're coming to the end of the session, so I will follow up with the audience with some things we didn't get to cover that I've just got some information on, such as including AI-specific copy on your site versus sort of LLMs.txt files, that sort of thing. We don't need to get into it now. But just for the last few minutes, is there anything else you'd like to add? Or Christopher, specifically, you have so much content on educating people around AI and using data. And what would be a great entry point for them to start?
The easiest two places to go. My company, trustinsights.ai. You can find our blog and our live stream. So we just did a whole thing on agentic SEO, which is a whole different can of worms. And then my personal website, ChristopherSPenn.com. Those would be the two places that I would suggest are the easiest entry points, and then you'll find everything after that.
Perfect. Jasper, do you want to add anything else? Because I know that you're looking at sort of expanding the tool that we've built and sort of growing our own like AI knowledge base for the clients.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just to provide maybe like some reassurance to people or whatever it is, because I know not everybody's very technical. Ultimately, I think a lot of these tools reward good content and they reward visibility. And there's kind of that whole thing, right, where you start out with the intention of just making something really good that people are receptive with. And then maybe you can get very stuck in trying to make all these optimizations. And on the other side of it, you end up with something that's not very good and it doesn't get cited. So I think it's important to remember too, that, keep making something that's really good and it will keep getting rewarded. And I wouldn't sacrifice the quality of whatever you produce just to get AI to cite it better. Try to find out how to optimize around it while continuing to make good things for people.
Yeah, and just to add on that, I think that communication and PR people are definitely well positioned to kind of play it like a little bit of a bigger role in that perspective, because they have the tools available, right? They are the ones that have access to the content, the direct lines to it. They can push it out quickly. They have the tools available. So I do think that when I speak to some of our customers or peers in the industry, that they are ears open, right? And that they are ready to kind of start using this more and start kind of gradually, like we had like 170 people register, which is definitely on the high side. So we do feel that everyone in our industry is kind of waking up to the fact that this is more an opportunity than a threat. And I think that is really, I think, the optimistic part of it. And I still believe it. And we're kind of here to help them with that as well.
What a wonderful and optimistic note to end on. Thank you, Jesse. It's very characteristic. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And thank you, Christopher, as well, for, again, getting up at, I think, 8 a.m. to be here. I really appreciate it. I will follow up with the recording of this webinar, as well as like the transcript, full notes, and all of the links for everything we've mentioned, all the tools. I'll probably send it tomorrow or sometime this week, depending on how well that goes. I'll probably use an AI for it, and then disclose it. In the meantime, if anyone has any questions they want to to carry on the discussion about, you can reach me at kate@prezly.com or go onto LinkedIn. Prezly and Jesse are both on LinkedIn, and they've been posting about this webinar. Just feel free to leave comments and we can have the discussion out in public. So thank you very much, and I hope you have the rest of your day pretty chill. And thank you very much for joining us, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Until next time.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.